Hello everyone. Welcome to the show. I am so super excited to finally be on TV in front of you with this amazing show. My name is Crystal Asige and this is the Ability Show. The reason we called it Ability? Well, because on this show we will be speaking about all matters to do with accessibility in the country. We wanted to call it Ability because it's so much more important to focus on what people can do rather than what people cannot do. And that's what we are advocating for on this show and throughout the entire season. Apart from all the things that I do personally as an individual in works to do with accessibility and advocacy for the disabled community, I also work at an organization, and this is called the Open Institute. At the Open Institute, I'm a manager of a program called Ability. Ability is focused on finding out just how accessible all buildings and streets are in Nairobi City. And further on in the program, we are also going to be assessing other cities around the country. This is such an amazing project and I am super excited and honored to be on it as the lead and as the manager of the Ability program. And since the Ability program started last year in May 2018, that is, Science TV Kenya found out about us, loved what we were doing and offered us a slot on their network, and now here we are. The Ability Show is going to be not just an educative program, but also a program which we hope will entertain you and give you a little bit of insight in all matters ability and how you and I together as a society can improve our country. In this particular episode, I thought it would be perfect to speak to people from the VIP community. VIP means visually impaired person. The three gentlemen that will feature on this particular episode are Ivan Omondi, Wilson Masharia, and Sam Waweru. All brilliant minds and brilliant speakers, and do all that they can in their own capacity around advocacy for visually impaired persons and the disabled community at large. I met up with them over lunch, as we usually do, but this time I explained and asked them about their opinions on ability in Kenya. Here they are answering our first question, which was surrounding what they think comes to mind when they first hear the word ability.
What comes to mind when I hear ability is full and effective participation at an equal basis with others. So this means that being a person with a disability, regardless of the type of disability, the barriers that I face in the society, whether attitudinal or physical or societal, should be interrupted, because in real sense, that's what causes my disability. For instance, if I look at, let's say, the new banknotes, if I cannot interact with them well as a visually impaired person, that's what makes me a disabled person, not my disability, which is visual.
Persons with disability basically feel left out. We are more of second-class citizens when it comes to matters ability. We believe that the environment is not conducive enough for us to be able to lead the life that we should be leading.
Personally, I completely agree with the sentiments that were just made surrounding ability. The issue is that we all live our own lives. Of course, that's natural for us. We're human beings. What else are we supposed to do? We don't usually think of other people. Our empathy levels may be a little bit low on some issues, but in general, the disabled community, I feel, are left behind. We are forgotten about in several aspects of life. Generally, we all live in our own little silos because we have our own issues, our own challenges, our own ambitions, and our own dreams to fulfill. And so this show, and this first episode in particular, is to introduce you all to the topics and issues surrounding ability in Kenya. One of the things that the gentlemen did speak about when we met with them is the issue that the disabled community, us ourselves, don't mainstream our disabilities into society. This means that we are usually at home, not really speaking to people, not really explaining what we go through, not letting people into our lives so that they might be able to understand what we go through on a daily basis. Sam had something specific to say about this, but before we hear what he had to say, I also wanted to share with you that at the Ability program at the Open Institute, we are working on this specifically. We wanted to work with different kinds of people, volunteers who came on board with us on the Ability program so that they can understand what it might feel like to live in our shoes. These volunteers included all people from different walks of life. They included university students, professionals from different sectors, including engineering, design, construction, law, and all others. We gave them a small challenge to see what it could feel like for them to live with wheelchairs, white canes, blindfolds, and so on, because we were trying to simulate disability. But before we go there, let's hear what Sam had to say about this specific volunteer training day.
As persons with disabilities, we don't mainstream others into our world. As a blind person, I think we should also take the sighted people and make them do things while they're blindfolded so that the mindset can change.
Morning guys, it is volunteer training day and we are just finished setting up. As you can see, the tent is up, the chairs, tables have come. We're waiting for the caterer for the breakfast and of course waiting for the volunteers to come. It's going to be a really good day. What we plan to go through today is a simulation of disability. We've been able to borrow lots of props to simulate disability. For example, wheelchairs, blindfolds, we have earplugs and earmuffs to replicate the deaf and other bits and bobs that we are going to use with the volunteers so that they can see what it might feel like to have a disability. Second exercise we're going to do is we're going to have ITDP, which is the Institute of Transport and Development Policy, as well as the Nairobi Design Institute, NDI, who will be coming and giving presentations on what they've done in the past and how, together with Ability, of course, are going to collaborate throughout these next coming months. And then, of course, in the afternoon, we're going to go through our digital questionnaire or audit form, which the volunteers will be using to map out through the week next week, answering all the questions that we need to know about basic accessibility features in Nairobi buildings and streets. So the days are starting, but we're very excited. People are, getting a bit nervous, but when you're nervous, it means that something is important to you. So looking forward. So the reason why we do Ability is because we're trying to show people that, hey, you know what? These streets out here are not accessible, right? I was not born visually impaired. I was born with my eyesight, but I acquired my visual impairment when I was around 15, 16 in high school. And I started to realize, because I've lived in both worlds now, how important this stuff is. How important it is to have a ramp that is well maintained, how important it is to have street lights, to have traffic lights that are working, to have pavements that are wide enough, to go into a building and have an elevator that works, and to have that elevator have braille on the buttons, etc, etc. These small things that we probably don't even notice until, like myself in my life, I became visually impaired. It's only until you get arthritis that you realize, hey, it's really hard to walk around. Things like that. I still want to live my life, but the infrastructure has to be in place for me to do that, right? It's not just about you guys that can see. It's because us guys are being left behind. Us we're being forgotten about. People who have different types of conditions, which they have acquired through accident or whatever it might be. We want to get into groups and give you guys a small exercise, if that's okay. For like the next few hours, we want to give you a challenge of simulating a disability.
So what we do at Anaerobic Design Institute is we use design to solve problems, social problems, economic problems in Nairobi, in Kenya, and in Africa, because what we are trying to bring into the region is designing solutions by us, for us. Our whole foundation of what we teach is centered around what we call human-centered design, putting your human or your user at the center of everything that you're designing for, thinking about them from start to finish. It's thinking about empathy, which is actually what we're doing now. So how do you think about immersing yourself in the lives of the people that you're designing for, to feel what they feel, to understand what they go through? And then after that, how do you now focus on the problem that pains them the most? We want to make a shift from making people want things to making things that people want. Crystal is actually doing human-centered design right now with you guys, because she is creating a participatory approach. Like, you get to participate in what we're trying to build on and work on. So that is what we also do in the field.
My name is Naomi Maura. I work for an organization called Institute for Transportation and Development Policy, ITDP. Okay, there it is. So we work in about 7 countries around the world. We have our Africa office in Nairobi, and our work is on creating sustainable public transport. So we advocate for mass transit. You've heard of the bus rapid transit. And also, we also advocate for walking and cycling.
The day is almost over. This is going to be the last exercise before the volunteers go home.
Being in the wheelchair for the first time, it's not been easy moving around, especially with the steep ramps. And I've also realized that we actually need each other to have our ways around this institution.
Today I got to experience how it is to be disabled, and I actually realized that it is important to have a place which is friendly for everyone, because they get left out a lot.
We are not sensitive enough to the ones who are disabled. Maybe if you find a parking slot and it's marked for the disabled, are we leaving it for the disabled, or are we ignorantly ignoring the fact that there's someone who can actually use it?
We need a more inclusive society, one that is universal. It is good for everyone, whether you have a hearing impairment or not.
When going through the online questionnaire with the volunteers, we had some people make comments and share like their thoughts. So there are a couple of tweaks that we're going to do over the weekend before we start mapping on Monday as well. So that's been really valuable for us to have them actually here, go through it with us and try it out literally, and hopefully they've all understood what they have to do and what's expected of them. But we have told them all that we are on the phone, we are on email, and we are on the group that we have put together on WhatsApp as well, for them to ask any questions that they might have over the weekend, so that we're all ready for Monday.
So what exactly are the issues that we are trying to find out about? Well, the Ability program, like I said, is focused on buildings and streets and how accessible they are to everyone, but especially people with disabilities. We took the volunteers alongside our audit forms, which are basically questionnaires with all kinds of questions that we were trying to find out about these buildings and streets in several areas around Nairobi. These areas included South B, Westlands, several malls, several government buildings, and churches, universities, so on and so forth. The questions included things like, do buildings have elevators? Do those elevators have audio and braille prompts? Do these buildings have ramps at entrances and exits? Do they have corridors that are wide enough for people to use comfortably as they walk in and out and through the building? Does the building have stairwells that are safe and well lit and in good repair? Do those stairwells have sturdy railings that someone can support themselves while going up and down them? And in the streets, we wanted to find out things like, are there traffic lights that work? Do those traffic lights have sonic accessibility features? Are there safe crossing spaces in the streets? Do the streets have pavements that are also wide enough for people to use safely as they walk through them? There are so many things that we used on our questionnaires to find out just how accessible these areas in Nairobi are. The volunteers that we worked with worked diligently with us throughout the mapping weeks and found out so much information for us. We have been able, until now, to assess over 600 entities around Nairobi City. When I explained to my friends Sam, Wilson, and Ivan about what we are doing on the Ability program, they gave me a little bit of insight on what they've had to experience personally with the buildings and streets around the city. Let's have a listen to what they had to say.
Our streets are basically one hell of a death trap. There's a nice program called 1,000 Ways to Die. I think we should be listed there because, number one, when it comes to our buildings, as has been mentioned, 3/4 of them, that makes it 90% of the buildings in this town are not accessible. So we have a lot of difficulties. I remember there's one building, one lift, which claimed was accessible, but the braille on it was upside down. So you can imagine, our streets are not accessible. If you're into extreme sports, maybe the streets of the Nairobi will be the perfect place for you. Like I give you a very good example. Where Mfangano Street meets Moi Avenue. If you are interested in bungee jumping and cannot afford it, try and cross there. There's a very big gaping manhole which has been there for over 7 months. So you can imagine as a blind person, how did I discover it? I had to fall into it to know that it was there, and it has never been fixed. So talking about the pavements, which are infested with hawkers, the Nairobi City, the county government has done a very good job of placing billboards in the middle of the pavements. I do not know how or why. I don't know how they came up with this. So you can imagine as a wheelchair user, as a person who's a white cane user, are you able to move from one point of this town to the next? Of course not.
I've been at the University of Nairobi. That's where I have interacted with buildings. And one thing is that most of the buildings are very old, so they are not accessible at all. Government offices, I go to lifts, and there are times where I'm in the lift alone or with my other blind friend, and we are unable to press the button to go to a certain floor because the buttons on the lift are touch. You have to see the number so that you press. You see, with accessibility, with universal design, we talk of a perceivable thing that you can either hear, touch, feel, you can understand properly, and one that is robust to be able to accommodate all the accessibility features.
Personally, I interact with the courts a lot, the law courts, and it's nowhere I can go alone as a visually impaired person. First of all, there are poorly done staircases. I might have the option of a lift which has no audio or no braille whatsoever. So I end up choosing to use the staircases, which are placed in different locations. So it's first tricky tracing the staircases, because when I get to one floor, I have to move to another side of the building to look for other staircases.
As funny as these experiences might sound, to be honest, I have gone through many of them myself. I have fallen down, I have embarrassed myself, I have hurt myself countless amounts of times in all kinds of environments in the city and also in other cities in Kenya. These experiences aren't just something that happens once or twice or in a blue moon, but these are daily problems that we face as visually impaired people, but also as a disabled community at large. The reason why I wanted these gentlemen to explain to you their experiences is not just so that you can understand what we go through on a daily basis, but also so that there can be a concerted effort towards making these buildings and streets more accessible for every single person, because nobody wants to be left behind. Nobody wants to have to request for independence or request for the freedom to do what they want and to achieve the things that they want to achieve in our cities. Wilson continues to explain one or two things about those who are making an effort in advocacy around accessibility in the country.
There has been significant progress on the society, which should be attributed to persons with disabilities coming out there and helping build mental ramps, changing the perception and attitude of persons in the society about persons with disabilities, where people understand that we are integrated in the society, we are part of them, we are a part of diversity that should be appreciated.
Hey, my name is Crystal Asige and this is Blind Girl Manenos. Today I'm going to talk about the perks of being blind. Number one, there are some chores that I don't get to do, like cleaning the windows because I can't see if they're dirty or clean. Number two, I get out of writing notes in meetings. No one ever asks me to write notes. 3, I get to jump queues, mostly at the bank, in shopping malls, because people are like, we don't want to make our wait too long. 4, you know how you walk down the street and you see someone that you don't really want to see? That's not an issue for me because I don't see them. 5, I hear many people complaining about the KPLC bill. Well, that's not a worry for me because my light bill is pretty much at 0. Well, actually, I do use it for the fridge and charging my phone, all that and that. But I don't use the lights at night, so that's also a perk. 6, they get me onto flights first and they are super good to me. In fact, sometimes I've been bumped up to first class just because of my disability. It's cool. And also business class. Business class lounge. That's what I was going to say. Sorry, let me do it again. And into business class lounge. Imagine there was some few times that they bumped me up to first class and put me in the business class lounge. I was balling. 7, it's actually a jerk filter. Some people come to me and they talk to me, but they're not too sure about me because of my disability, and so they're not nice anyway. At least this way, with my blindness, I can tell who's a nice person genuinely and who's not. So it weeds out the bad people. 8, I'm never the designated driver. Unless, of course, you want me to drive you into... Stage fright is no longer a problem for me because I can hardly ever even see past row number 1. I think that was number 9. 10, I get tax exemptions! Okay, not from everything, but there are some things that I do get discounts from because of being blind. There are so many other perks that I can't fit into this video, but if you'd like to hear more about my Blind Girl Bananas, please subscribe to the channel right here. See you guys. That was the very first episode that I did called Blind Girl Manenos, where I spoke about the perks of being blind, because sometimes there are perks. Like I said, we have to find some humor in what we go through from day to day. But going back to the show, Wilson also had something more to say about the things that people are doing, which are helping all kinds of people around the city. Let's have a listen.
There are people who have attempted to make buildings accessible. I have met such where there are staircases and ramps equally placed. But people hardly involve persons with disabilities when they are doing this. So that ramp that has been fitted ends up becoming a precarious, a danger zone for someone who is visually impaired like myself. One time I was going up on a ramp, but there was nothing really guiding me, so I ended up falling on the side of the ramp because there were no bars, metal bars placed to show me that this is where the ramp ends.
From where I sit, I receive so many complaints of persons with disability who have been, in one way or the other, been discriminated on by virtue of their disability. I'm aware of a few establishments which deny entry to persons with disability because of the liability issues. So we have the statistics, we know these establishments, we know what needs to be done. Now how to do it is now what we need to get our hands around.
Right. We have been speaking about the problems so far, but what are the solutions that have been going on in the country? Well, I have to say that the government of Kenya have been very good at policy making. They have extensive policies surrounding disability in the country. These policies are extensive, they are diverse and quite equitable in my opinion. One example is on the 1st of June, which was our Madaraka Day in Kenya, as you know, the government, alongside with Central Bank of Kenya, launched the new generation banknotes. These banknotes have been reprinted and they have been working extensively over months and months to have them launched. And finally, they're here. I have here with me in studio 5 of the notes that have been released finally to the public. First is the 50 shilling note, the 100 shilling note, the 200 shilling note, the 500, and finally the 1,000 shilling note. What we were told on the launch day of these 5 new notes is that they have several features that are new and that will be safer to use all over the country with any type of person who is interacting with these notes. Here on the Ability Show, we were specifically very excited to hear about the accessibility features that they have put in place with these new notes. What we were told on the launch day is that CBK have put specific lines or bars, they can also be called, on these notes, so that somebody with visual impairment like myself can just touch the notes and feel by the amount of bars on the specific note what they are holding in their hand. On the 50 shilling note, there is supposed to be 1 bar right here on the corner and as well on the opposite side on this corner. The 100 shilling note will have 2 bars on the same positions, one in this corner and the other on the other corner. And these bars go on in seniority to increase. For example, if the 50 shilling note has 1 line, the 100 shilling note will have 2, the 200 shilling note will have 3 lines, the 500 note will have 4 lines, and finally the 1,000 shilling note will have 5 lines to be felt just by touch by the visually impaired community. When I first got a hold of these notes, I was extremely excited to find out more about these accessibility features and the lines and the bars that have been put in place for us VIPs. Apart from that, everyone around me told me how pretty they look and how these security features are much more robust in these new generation currencies. But unfortunately, for me personally, I haven't been able to feel these lines at the corners of the notes. I've tried and tried, I've turned them upside down, inside out, wrong way around, but I haven't been able to feel them myself. And the people that I have been giving these notes out to also try have said the same thing. They can't really feel the lines. People who are sighted can see the lines, which is great, but people who are not sighted cannot feel the lines. I did this experiment with both sighted people and visually impaired people across the streets in Nairobi. So if you have been able to get these notes so far, tell me what you think at the end of the show.
Have a very progressive legal framework as far as persons with disabilities are concerned. To begin with, the Constitution of Kenya, which recognizes diversity, having equality as one of the national value and principles, appreciating everybody's dignity, and even having an article on disability, the inclusion of disability specifically in Article 54. There's also the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and other framework, both international and local. What we should be talking about right now, or what the conversation should be about, is about compliance, implementation of these laws, coming up with action points on how to implement these laws best, because the Constitution is already 9 years old, no longer new. The Convention is 11 years old, no longer new, and yet we are having the conversation we still had back then without this framework.
If you know me, and if you know any other disabled person, you will know that we also want to live our lives. We want to be independent and further our careers and extend in our education and just live our dreams in general. But we will continue to say that we need more support, especially in the infrastructure that we live in. Just imagine if our buildings and streets were made more accessible to every single person. That means that people in the disabled community could further their careers and get jobs. We could go to school and further our education. We could start businesses and employ people. We could, in general, just be more active citizens of the country. And that's what we all want, to be honest, just to have purpose and feel significant in all that we do. Here's what the rest of the guys had to say about the same topic, what they could do more of and do better of if only our buildings and streets were made more accessible.
As an individual, I'm a very happy person. I love going out. I love discovering new places. But now the hazards which exist for a person with disability are too many. So I would really want to go out there a lot. But there's so many things which would make me opt to stay in my house because I fear losing my life.
I really want to do this, fight for people's rights, help people access justice, and unfortunately, the platform from which I can do that, which is mostly the law courts, they are, not accessible at all. So it gets to a point where I wonder, even if a client or somebody were to approach me to represent them, they would end up feeling as if they are causing danger to me. As much as I want to argue their case well, comfortably, I still have to worry about how I'm going to get about that platform. So if accessibility was at the back of everybody's mind when designing such infrastructure and buildings, then that would make my work a lot more easier and fun.
On a daily basis, I walk on the street sometimes by myself without any help, and maybe sometimes with another blind person so that we are able to share and know where is it that most of us find it hard to navigate. Having that information, having that knowledge, I can be able now to properly advocate for better accessible streets, better accessible buildings for persons with disabilities in Kenya. And I think if most of us did that, we would maybe create awareness and try and influence some of these places to be more accessible.
On the Ability Show, we wanted to add a segment where you get to interact with us. So let's get right into it. Welcome to the part of the show where you get to ask Ability. Today we have a question from Paul, who has a friend that he's recently made who's in a wheelchair. And he asks, what's the best way to have a conversation with somebody who is a wheelchair user? Thanks for your question, Paul. Let's talk about it. A common mistake that people usually make when they're in a conversation with a wheelchair user is that they either walk too quickly or too slowly, number one, or number two, they end up standing up for the entire conversation instead of remembering that somebody in a wheelchair needs to talk to you at eye level. So I would say to you, Paul, that you should try and use the pace of walking and talking that the wheelchair user is setting for you. Don't walk too quickly and don't walk too fast. Just walk next to them as the two of you continue to conversate. And then if you come to a point where you are standing or you are sitting down, make sure that you're doing so at an eye level of the wheelchair user. The reason for this is because if you can imagine you're a wheelchair user and you have to always speak to somebody who is standing above you, that can get quite tiring for your neck and your head. Also, it could be seen as you making the person in a wheelchair feel a little bit inferior to you because you're always having to talk down at them and they are always having to talk up at you. So those are two tips that I would give you, Paul, to have a better conversation with a wheelchair user. And I hope that helps. We've all heard about the golden rule, which is treat people the way you'd like to be treated. But here at Ability, we go by the platinum rule, which is treat people the way they want to be treated and not the way you think you should treat them. If you have any more questions for us on anything to do with disability, any questions, any comments that you might want to make, please, you can do that on our email address, which is ability@openinstitute.com. And you can also follow us on all our social media platforms, which are on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Our handle is just Open Institute. We're close to the end of episode 1 of the Ability Show, but I truly hope that you have learned 1 or 2 things about accessibility and the issues surrounding the same. The disabled community are part of the community. We are abled in very many ways. It's just that we need your support as the general populace to help us achieve what we are meant to achieve. We hope that you join us again for the next episode of the Ability Show, which is going to come up every single Saturday on Science TV at 8 p.m. My name is Crystal Asige, and before I go, I'd like to let Wilson finish off the show. Thanks, and see you later.
Sometimes there's a cost constraint to it, but what should be driving people is that every investment and every coin that they use to enhance accessibility is a vote towards the future that we all want.